on July 24th to the 27th, so I'm pretty excited about going. I've never been. I guess I think Todd Ness actually puts it on. The guy from the American Primate Association, he puts it on. He sent us the invite, asked us if we'd come down, and so I'm pretty excited about going. I think it'll be good times.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. I think, when is that? Is that next weekend?
Yeah, next weekend.
Yeah. I think it'll be fun. We'll get out there and, be able to talk to some people that are all interested in the same topic. Might be some good info out there. Be a good time.
Too bad Will's in California. He got the invite too, and I know he's kind of stuck where he's at. It'd be nice to have him come too.
Yeah, my schedule's a little bit tight right now, so maybe next time. Yeah,
it would be a blast to have you out there. I was thinking we could set up a little mobile podcasting station out there, and maybe we'll do the show from out there. Maybe we'll see if we can get an uplink to Will, get him involved on it too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it'd be fun. I mean, get some live discussion going.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I think it's a good idea.
The first guest tonight, this guy contacted me, and he's got a hell of a story. I was gonna just kind of retell it, but I begged him to come on and tell the story. And I don't want to give too much away. I want to have him tell the story and hear what you guys have to say on it. But I wanted to invite Scott to the show. Hey, Scott, it's Wes. How are you?
Pretty good, Wes. Pretty good.
Hey, I got Will and Woody on the phone. Woody hasn't heard the story. I told Will a little bit about it. But I wanted to go ahead and give you the mic and let you take it away and tell us the story about the guy that you met a couple years back.
Growing up, I went on a church mission for my church. It was a 2-year mission, and we were in sets of two missionaries. I served my mission in Sacramento, California. And while I was there, we did a lot of our time was just knocking on doors and sharing a message. One of the men that we came to, we knocked on his door, and he let us in. Wasn't a really good help. We shared a message with him. While we were in his house, we noticed that he had deer and elk mounts on his wall and a big lake trout. And so after our message, my companion, he was from Montana, and he loved to hunt and fish. And I was from Idaho, and I loved to hunt and fish. So, of course, our conversation drifted towards hunting. Had some good stories. We came back 2 more times, the gentleman. We set up appointments and came back. He let us come back in. And each time we came back in, we'd give our little spiritual thought, but then we'd go right back to hunting. On the 3rd time that we were at his house, my companion was telling him, I like hunting alone. He goes, I like being out there. I get to see more animals. And so William, this was the man's name. His name was William. I won't tell you his last name, but William said, you shouldn't be out there hunting alone. It's just not safe. There's things out there that we just need to be left alone. And my companion, without even saying a word, said, "Oh, you mean Sasquatch?" And Williams kind of went blank for a second. He goes, "Yeah, things like that." Well, it didn't go any further than that. We left that day, and I, of course, wanted to know with my companion how we met Sasquatch. And he goes, "Well, my brothers and my dad were heading up hunting, and one crossed the road." And I thought, wow, that's really cool. So he told me that story. And anyhow, the animal crossed the road and went up and jumped into a wash. We call them washes. It's where water comes down a mountain and cuts out a pretty deep ravine. And it went and jumped in one of these. And they had no intention of following it. But it was neat to hear his story. Well, we went back to meet with William a couple of days later. His landlord said that he was in the hospital. He was sick with I can't even think of it.
Emphysema.
Emphysema, thank you. Wes. He was sick with emphysema, so we were thinking, oh, great. Well, we left a phone number, and a couple of days later, William called us and said, "Hey, listen, I'm home from the hospital. Come on over. I want to visit with you boys." And so we went over, and when we got there, he said, "I really don't want to hear a spiritual message today." He says, "There's some things that have been on my mind that have happened to me throughout my life, and I just kind of want to clear them up." And I took it as, okay, kind of a deathbed confession, because from the looks of him, he wasn't doing very well. And we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what he was going to tell us. But He started in on this. He said this happened back in 1971. He said he was a sheriff officer in the Dakotas. He didn't say whether it was North or South Dakota. And he said him and his deputies were approached by an agency of the government to eventually kill one of these animals. William had told us also that these creatures had been kind of a menace in that area. The government decided, I guess, to come in and do something about it. But William said didn't really say a lot of details. He told us that later that a lot of that stuff he was going to just take to his grave with him, but he had to get some of this off of his mind. But going on with the story, he said the government, or I'm sorry, not the government, don't let me use that word, the agency, let's use that word, had already been monitoring these creatures. They were living in a canyon. How the whole thing kind of got going is they'd been monitoring, and they were going to go ahead and do the project of taking one of these animals or one of these creatures. And William said it was our responsibility to do the shooting. He said we were in a 4-man helicopter, and when they got there, well, they already knew the plan, but 2 other helicopters, smaller 2-man helicopters, had already been pushing these creatures out of the canyon. Well, things didn't go as planned. The creatures split, went up out of the canyon, both sides, and they did have a female, which we found out later was a female. She did exactly like was planned. She went right down the canyon, and they had what they guess they called a bait station. I'll explain that a little bit later. But the female was pushed down the canyon, backing up a little bit. When we got there, William had a small box. Inside that box, he had a cassette, and he had some pictures. He kept this from the agency, unknown by the agency, but I'll tell you that part later, too. So anyhow, he had pictures. He had an audio. I'll kind of use both of them as I play this out, because that's what he did with us, except for we had the information in front of us. He said that as they pushed the female down the canyon, she eventually come out in a clearing, and it was a small clearing where they had the bait station. And he took one photo, and it's the very first photo, and he had to actually point me where the creature was, the Bigfoot. I said, oh, okay, that's where it's at. The next picture I see, she is walking, but there's a youngster behind her. It's probably about, well, I didn't know how tall it was. William said it was about 3 foot tall. So it wasn't a baby, but it was still a youngster. And it was following pretty close behind her in the picture. The bait station was something I'd never heard of and never seen, and thanks to Wes, he finally helped me figure it out. They had a oval-shaped tree, pretty large tree, and in this tree were cereal boxes. And I just couldn't figure out the cereal boxes. I knew it was cereal boxes because in one of the pictures it showed a cornflakes box, and I think another one was an Apple Jacks box. And they were situated all over this tree that looked like a round Christmas tree. About 4 of the photos, the pictures that he showed us, showed the animal annoyed by the 2 helicopters. Only in one of the pictures, actually, as she's coming out of the canyon, do you actually see the bottom skids or the landing gear of the helicopter, so you kind of know the other helicopters are there, but they were swinging around and keeping her going towards the bait station. We didn't really get any good look at her. Just to make note here, I couldn't tell how big she was. I mean, I guess she had wide shoulders, but when you're taking pictures from the air, the size all goes. You don't have anything to judge the size on. If you're on ground level, you can say, oh, yeah, this is big as that tree or as fat as that tree. But when you're in the air, it's pointed at the ground, and you don't have anything to judge the size off it. So I can just say that it was a hairy creature. At this point, he played the video, or not the video, but didn't have any video, the cassette tape. And about the first 3 minutes, all you heard was the helicopter blade. It was just really kind of annoying. Then you hear William say, "Are you loaded?" And you can hear that distinctly. And someone else, his deputy, which was his deputy, said, "Yes." And then he responds, "Proceed forward." At this point, William said, I threw the rope ladder out of the helicopter. This is where the other, I want to say 4 pictures, but I think it was 5 pictures came into play. He was able to snap off because now the creature had turned around. I guess I got to back up here. I got to back way up. I didn't think about the baby. After the first photo, I guess after the second photo you see her and her young. Well, William told me that right after they snapped that picture, she darted into a thicket. And of course the helicopters went and chased her out of this thicket. Well, when she emerged from the thicket, there was only one of them. It was just her, and she hid her young. Anyhow, getting back to the point where I was at, they took several pictures. All of the pictures, by the way, are clear pictures. None of them are fuzzy or what I see on the internet. These are all clear, distinct pictures of the creature. The 4 pictures that were taken, or 5 pictures that were taken, where she's actually looking up at the helicopter. She's got her arms up. The wind and the turbulence from the helicopter is making her kind of shield the wind. You can tell from the grass around where she's at that it's just matted down because of the wind, and her hair, you can tell from the pictures that it's kind of matted down, like her head and stuff. Just to kind of let you know the state that she was in, she was stressed. I mean, she was disoriented, I would say, confused, really stressed at what was going on, and I can see why. She had her hands up. I told Wes I noticed the insides of the hands on the picture. It kind of looked like she put her hands in dirt, kind of a grayish black or something, grayish color. But we got really good descriptions of her face. Wes kind of asked me about the face, and I said, well, around the eyes and the nose, and I do believe between the nose and the lip there was no hair. The hair was right above the eyebrows and got thicker that went up towards the top. She did kind of have a cone-shaped head. The head set right on the shoulders, no neck. The eyes were big. They were black. There was no white to the eyes, just black eyes. She had a flat nose. She had a big mouth. And almost every picture that was taken, her mouth was open. But because of the helicopter, and maybe because of the condition she was in, her mouth was cocked kind of sideways. It wasn't just open. It was kind of like she was, I would even look at one of the pictures and say she was growling, had the helicopter blade not been going. It looked like she was like really ticked off. And that's just kind of give you a description. Her color was, I would say almost a black brown. In the photos it doesn't, I guess it's kind of glistening hair, but the helicopter kind of had it matted down. But anyhow, he throws the rope ladder, and this is where the picture stops. And the audio keeps going. We listen. What he told me is that his deputy climbed down the ladder. When he got near the bottom rung, he reached up to the step just above him, looped his hand up and over the second step that was above that, and pulled his arm down, so it really just kind of locked him in. I think he did this for his safety in case he slipped off the ladder. He had with him a high-power rifle. He was using a 30-06. I was wondering if a 30-06 was a powerful enough gun. I use a 7-mag when I hunt, and I probably would have used a 300 or maybe a 50 grain or something, but he had a 30-06. Anyhow, he climbed down the ladder. At this point, William's just telling us the story now. We don't have any more pictures. And he says that he took aim. She still had her hands in the air and shot her point blank right in the chest. And so at this point, William has slowed down a little bit. He's probably he's emotional at this point. And this is the part that's really probably bugging in his life. And I was at that point wishing I hadn't heard the story. I was like, holy cow. I mean, after looking at these pictures, how could anyone shoot this thing? I told Wes earlier, I said, this thing looked human in the face, but animal on the body. It had an animal body, I would say more animalistic, but his face was more humanistic. He shot her, and as soon as he shot her, she let out this scream, blood-curdling scream. And it lasted about 7 seconds. And 7 seconds doesn't seem long, but on the audio, it seemed like a long time. And the scream was just hideous. I mean, it is a painful, awful scream. It even had I would call it a gurgle scream, a little bit of a gurgle scream to it. You had to listen to it to hear it, but it just sounded awful. He said as soon as that scream was done, she left and took off towards the canyon. And he said that first foot that pushed off, her first foot, he said, I bet she traveled 8 to 10 yards. And I thought, wow. And he said the second foot, he said it looked just like a long jumper as they're getting ready to leap off. He said each foot pushed itself further. And he said she just flew up the canyon. Of course, we're listening to the audio, and all of a sudden we hear another gunshot. And we're like, did you shoot her? He said, no. He said, at this point, after she took off, her young immediately tried to follow. But as soon as it got out of the bushes, it got disoriented with the helicopters. Immediately just stopped. And he said they swung their helicopter over and chambered another shell, and they just shot right in the head and killed it instantly. Pretty traumatic hearing his story on it, and I just couldn't believe the ethics on it. Just totally wrong. As soon as that shot was taken, their helicopter was motioned to go back to base. And he said we had to get our gunman, his deputy, back in the helicopter. So they flung out about 60 yards. He says while he was climbing back into the chopper, he said they moved quick. They had one of their choppers on the ground, loading the body into a burlap sack, putting it into a net, hooked underneath the helicopter, and they were off. And he went back, and that was basically all he told us. My companion then asked him, what happened to the female? Did you ever get her? And he just flat out said, I won't go into that. I'm not going to cover what happened there. Putting that together, I kind of I've listened to every one of your guys' shows. And I kind of thought, probably what happened is she ran up that canyon, expired, and that she took almost a point blank right to the chest. And maybe they had a run-in with the others trying to come back and get her. And I thought maybe they did more shooting that we don't even know about. I don't know. I'm just putting some pieces together. But anyhow, he warned us at the end of this. He goes, I'm taking a lot of this to my grave. He just said, it'd probably be wise for you guys not to say too much about this. He says, I don't want anything to see happen to you. He actually acquired the camera and the cassette tape. He had it hidden in his lunchbox. They never checked his lunchbox. He said he was put under oath that he would not say anything to anybody. He said other than us two, he had never revealed this. And I told Wes on the phone that I had never told my family or friends or my own personal family. I haven't told anybody. Wes was the first one I talked to, but really on the mission I was on, I had so much going on that in a couple of days I pretty much just put it in the back of my mind and chalked it up for something I wish I hadn't heard, but maybe I'd research later. And of course, research and stuff like this, you don't get anything. So I couldn't find anything up in Dakotas. But, so that's basically the story, guys.
That's a lot to take in. I'm still kind of just sitting here thinking over the whole thing, how it played out and what happened. I don't know what to say right now.
Yeah,
it's funny. Sort of a wow story.
I believe everything he had to say. I'm just kind of like, wow.
A lot of questions were unanswered, a lot of questions. Why did they have them as the shooters? Who was the agency? He didn't say anything. He kept a lot of that from. He told us the events that happened, everything else, how it all planned out, who he talked to. That was all kept from us.
Now, when Wes told me earlier, it made me think of, I've been in touch for some time now with a government insider that we call Mr. Black. He had related to me one time some of the different very high-level military and other government people that he had talked with over the years who were involved in this stuff. And he did relate to me that he spoke with someone who was actually in charge of that region around that time period, and there was some sort of an incident that the person who was in charge himself was going to oversee. So I'll have to contact him and see if it's the same situation. It could very well be, and maybe we'll get some more information for our listeners.
Back at that time in my life, very little was even to my knowledge on the Bigfoot creature, how it looked or that. I'd had a couple experiences in my life that led me to believe that they were real. There were real creatures out there. We just kind of left them alone. But at that point in my life, I just really didn't know much. All I know is later in my life, I did a lot of research and found out there's not very many sightings in the Dakotas. And they found a whole family group living there. So I don't know where it was, South Dakota, North Dakota, where it was, but they found a family, and I guess they were trouble. And I really thought, after the whole story was done, I really thought they were just trying to prove the creatures were real, or that's what.
How
the
long
whole
ago
thing
did
was
you
about.
hear the story from William?
Well, I took my mission from 84 to 86, and it was that summer. And I went to, let's see. So it was 85. It was March. I even looked it up. I have it in my journal. On my journal, all I put was William Bigfoot, and that's all I wrote. So I already know the story. So that's it, because I went back and I researched. I wanted to tell you guys that we contacted him on March 3rd of 1985. And so, like I said, he was not in good shape. We did see him 2 more times after that, at which point we always looked at the pictures. He let us have at the pictures and listen to the recording, although I didn't like the recording. That was very disturbing to me, but the pictures were interesting. Lots of detail. Like I said, these pictures were nice and clear. But after that second time after, he went back to the hospital, and he never got out of the hospital. So
no idea what happened to the pictures?
Yeah, well, I have no idea. He would not let us, because my companion was like, hey, will you let us borrow these? I got somebody I want to show, We had a hunter in our, one of the religious groups down there that he was a big hunter, and he wanted to show him. He said, no. He was not hip on letting anything go. So, so he kept it. It was in a little shoebox, and he had other paperwork in there too, but he never showed us. He just showed us the cassette tape and the pictures.
Scott, it's fascinating. The whole story is fascinating. It's funny, Woody and Will's response to it was just like my response. I know when you and I spoke the other day on the phone, you were probably thinking, man, for a guy that I hear talk all the time, you have nothing to say. And I was just, I could just, the whole story, I could just play it in my mind and see what's going on, and just in shock over the whole story. Just makes you wonder what those creatures did for them to pull the trigger. What do you think, Will?
Well, if it's the same account, Mr. Black was mentioning there was a group, like I said, around that time period in that part of the country, and I don't know yet without contacting him if it's the same group or not, but there was some problems, and I believe he said there were some people killed as well, or something to that effect, and it was a situation where they had to go in and eradicate the group.
See, Wes was the one that told me that that's why they were, because I thought they were just trying to find out if they're real or not. And I thought that government cover-up, they already know they're real. That's what I thought all along. But Wes said that actually when things like this happen, it's because they've actually had people come up missing, and they don't want to have a big scene. So that's why the government does what it does and goes in and cleans them up so that everything stays nice and quiet. And I thought, I never thought about that. That's cool. Because he had brought a lot of stuff to my attention. Just visiting with Wes, a lot of stuff that, Wes can even attest. I was like, I didn't want you guys to air this. I was like, I don't want you to air this. I just wanted to kind of clear my head of this, and I listened to you guys long enough that I really enjoy your shows. You guys are the real thing, and you're not out there to try and, some of these other things I've heard are just a joke, and you're not a joke. You're the real thing. And so that's why I wanted to bring you my experience. I wasn't expecting to go live with it, but I guess you are, and that's it. That was the story, so.
No, I appreciate it. And it's like I said, usually I just don't see them blasting them for no reason. If they did, that's a shame. If they are doing it for another reason, no one wants to see any animal just to be shot. Whether it's Sasquatch, whether it's a deer, whether it's, I think I'd feel the same seeing someone shoot a deer for no reason other than just to shoot it. I'd probably feel the same way, that it's unethical and it's not right. You had come across trackways. I wanted you to talk a little bit about that, Scott, the trackways you had found.
Okay, yeah, I will. Before I say that, Wes, I wanted to bring up something I noticed in the picture, too, and it came to me after I got off the phone with you. This creature, these creatures can't twist with their waist. They can't twist. They turn their whole, they can't twist with their neck. What am I saying? They can't twist with their neck. They turn their torso. Well, in these pictures, too, her legs were a little bit bent, but in order for her to look up, she had to pivot her back. It almost looked like she was standing up and leaning back. Like when you have that game where you go under that rope and you try to see how far you can go under that rope. She was kind of like that. Not that bad, but I'm just saying. That's how she was. In order to look up, she had to take her whole torso and put it back to look at the helicopter. So that was interesting. I don't know if I've never heard that, but I saw that in those pictures, and I thought I'd share that with you. Okay, going on to the next story. Yeah. We're going on to the next story here. When I was 12 years old, a gentleman in my church bought a bunch of land outside West Yellowstone in an area called Island Park. And it's actually outside Island Park. But he bought a bunch of land, and there was a small canyon with a stream in it. He wanted to take that stream, put a pond, so him and his grandkids could fish, stock it with trout. My dad and 4 other adults and about 6 kids went up there. What he was doing is he had acquired a bunch of dynamite. And I thought, yeah, go play with some dynamite. And little did I know that when we got up there, it was all us boys that were digging the holes to set the dynamite in to set off the charges. So spent all day digging, but it was pretty neat to see the dynamite go off. But I'll tell you what, we made a huge mess on both sides of that small canyon. And going down to the canyon about 3/4 of the way down, there was a game trail that we would use to walk over and then down in to dig the holes and set the charges. By the end of the day, we set off that last 3rd charge, and we weren't going to go back down. We were tired. We went back to camp, and I remember I probably ate something, and I crashed. I don't remember a thing. Me and 3 of my other friends were in a tent, but I woke up early the next morning, and I've always woken up early my whole life. I never can sleep in, but I was all antsy, and I remember my dad was up making the fire and getting ready to cook breakfast, and I really wanted to go down there. I wanted to go check and see what was going on. My dad said, no, just hold on. But I kept being antsy. So finally he said, okay, we'll walk to the rim of the canyon. It's only about 1/4 mile away. And we'll look, and then we'll wait for the others to get up. So I thought, okay, good. So we went over there. And, of course, I wanted to go down the canyon. So we went on down the canyon. And when we got down near that one trail, the dynamite that we'd done the day before just plastered each side with mud. And that game trail, we didn't use that anymore. It's too slippery the day before, so we hadn't used it. Well, overnight it set up a little bit, but there they were, plain as day. It was a 16 3/4 inch. That's what 16 and a half. It's about 16 3/4 inch footprint. I told Wes on the phone, I'm flat-footed. I have no arch in my foot. Must be the Indian in me, but I'm only partial Indian, but must be I just have flat feet. They're kind of square-looking feet. And this foot kind of looked just like my foot, except for it was over two times bigger than my foot. The only thing I noticed that was different was that when you looked at it real close, the toe on the foot stuck out just a little bit, and it was way bigger, a lot larger than the other toes, proportionate. He had a big toe. Of course, we didn't do anything. My dad asked, he goes, you know what this is? And I said, it's a bare foot. And he goes, no, it's something you don't want to mess around with. He said, you don't want to mess around with this. This isn't stuff that we want to deal with, and you just leave it alone, and definitely don't kill one. And I said, why don't you want to kill one? He goes, bad things will come your way if you kill one. I said, yeah, probably. Now I understand. Yeah, probably bad things would come my way if I tried to shoot one. But we went back up to camp, and my dad went and talked to the other adults, and I tried to get my friends out of bed. And finally, about an hour later, the adults immediately got together, got ready. They took a camera, and they went down and started taking some pictures. The guy that owned the land had a big wash bin, and he actually put the wash bin upside down over one of these tracks. He came back up later, and he casted several of the tracks. My dad actually saw those casts, but I never did. I mean, we sat and measured them. We also measured the step to step, and they're about 45 inches. I know the adults were trying to step, and it was hard for them to make those steps. Us kids were like jumping from step to step. We had to jump to get from one step to the next. But we picked up the tracks and followed them. I went clear across the little mud splash that we made about 75 yards. Then they went on for a ways, because after that, the dirt up there is actually soft. It's not hard or rocky. We could easily see where it left those tracks and went on. It actually went for a couple yards further, and then it actually went off the game trail. But you could easily see where it was stepping and stepping and stepping. And we probably went in all a total of 200 yards, and our parents, our fathers, just putting into it. They said, listen, we probably don't want to find out what's on the other side of these tracks. We got a lot to do. To go home, let's get back to camp. And that's what we just left alone at that. And when my dad showed me those tracks, I was like, what would any idiot be up here in bare feet for? Because on the side of that canyon, up there, we have little patches. They're probably maybe a foot in diameter of cactus, and it grows really close to the ground. It's only like 5 inches tall, but this cactus is terrible. You'd be walking along, and all of a sudden one will snag and go right through your Levi's, and you're like, "Ow, dang it," you know. And I was just thinking, man, if somebody was on barefoot and they stepped on one of these cactus things, they'd be screaming bloody murder. And that was what was going through my mind, is what kind of idiot would be up here in bare feet.
It reminds me of the tracks Woody and I found. You know, it's before our experience. That's the first thing that went through our mind was, why in the world would someone be up here barefoot, running around in this area? You know, I had steel-toe boots, and I had a hard time getting down this little pathway we were trying to get down. I remember thinking, why would someone be up here barefoot? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, before you know anything about the subject, we were the same way. When I was 14, a buddy and I found 3 sets of tracks in the snow, and it was really, really cold. We're like, who's up here? Well, number one, the tracks were huge, and secondly, it's like, okay, who's up here barefoot in this kind of condition? I think anybody that finds something like that, you know, without knowing what it is, kind of scratch your head and think, geez, that's kind of weird. Who's up here with bare feet?
Yeah. So anyhow, so I kind of learned early on. I told Wes, I took that story, and my grandpa, he lives up in Star Valley, Wyoming. He hunts up, you go up Alpine, Wyoming, up into the Little Grays, and it goes, or Big Grays and then Little Grays. He hunts up that way. And I mentioned that to my grandpa, and he immediately said, you know, I don't want to talk about this. This is not something to be talked about. Let's leave it alone. And he left and went out the house real quick. And no, it pissed him off that I said that. And after he left, my grandma goes, this all my grandma said. She said, Grandpa doesn't talk about that instance. He said, earlier when your uncles were young, they were up there hunting, and one of these things chased Grandpa out of his hunting spot. I thought, wow, okay. And then Grandma told me, we just don't talk about that. That's just, she goes, it's kind of like the devil. If you start talking about it, bad things happen. And she said, if you get wound up in this, bad things happen. So that was in my mind. The picture of these creatures is, leave them alone, bad things will happen. And that was my view.
A lot of the old timers had that opinion. I think it's one of the reasons that it's taken for so many years, you know, for it to finally come out into the public. You know, this stuff has been known about many, 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 many years. I mean, the oldest article I know about goes back to around 1811, and
wow.
Almost every decade to the present, you know, there's been stories in local areas published about things like this, but nobody ever really talked about it. I mean, it was never a big story anywhere, or really went beyond any local stuff going on. So,
yeah, back in those days, they didn't have the internet. They had newspapers, but if you lived in one town,
right,
and you read a newspaper, you only read your local newspaper. Nobody, you know, it probably happened back in the 1817, 16, 1500s. They were probably all the way back in time, but you know, nobody talked about it.
There's a couple of things that I keep like mulling over in my head, and I just can't let it go. On your first story about the shooting of the Bigfoot there, you know, that's probably something that probably happens more often than we actually think about or even know. You know, that probably happens quite a bit. And the other thing is too, that one of the questions, and you said it earlier, Scott, but I kind of wanted to say it again, is what happened to the female? And then why did they not want to talk about it later?
Yeah.
You know, it's like that. I have to know, but I'll never find out.
I mean, he immediately let me know, because my companion asked, and he said, I will not talk about that. Well, why won't you talk about it? You told us about everything else, that's it. That was it.
Yeah, I wonder what happened, why you wouldn't let that go, let that part of the story
I can't
go.
remember that on one of your episodes, 24, 25, 26, I made a little statement down below, because I had this information on me, and I made a little statement. You probably read it. It said, if we were to know how many government people have actually known these things exist, I think we would be totally shocked over the ages. All the people that have worked on this since day one in the United States, I bet it is an awful lot of people that have worked with the government that just keep their mouths shut, that know these things exist. I mean, I'm just listening. I'm like, of course they, when people say it's a government cover-up, I'm like, yeah, it is. I know it is.
Well, yeah, that was kind of like that thing that Wes did, and we've talked about it on prior shows, when you were talking about that print that we found and we went down there. I don't know what the heck happened to all the trees. We went up there the next day and all the down timber and the twisted trees that were there, and they were pushed over, and they were 2 to 3 inch limbs had been, if you take a rag or a dish towel and you squeeze it to squeeze all the water out, that's what all these trees, I'm talking trees 2, 3, not quite, there might have been some 4-inch diameter, but those were broken. They weren't twisted. And, Wes and I, this was before Wes and I we were just out on our motorcycles going for a cruise. I think it was in the summertime because it was hot. And I looked over the footprint and I thought, that's weird. And we went down to the water and we talked for a little bit. And I think I had mentioned something to Wes about the footprint on the way up, and on the way back to the trail back up top where our bikes were at. We were looking at it like, what the heck? That was weird. And kind of didn't think a whole lot about it. Just thought it was kind of a weird scenario or a weird scene. And man, we went back. Everything had been lifted out, and it had to have been done by helicopter. There's no other way that they could have got all that stuff out of there.
Who did you have on 2 shows ago? Jim, you that guy that you had on that said about the camp being all ripped up, and then they came back the next day and everything's all cleaned up?
Oh, that was Bob Garrett.
Bob, that's right. Yeah, I like Bob. That was a good show. Sorry, I thought it was Jim.
Yeah,
Bob Garrett. That was a good story. I also watched that, watched his little videos, and it's funny how he said, everything's all torn up, torn to shreds, fires thrown everywhere, and the next day they come back and everything's all put back together.
It happened right underneath our noses, and we were just clueless to it the whole time until, we actually, we did say, that's weird. We never thought it really had anything to do with Bigfoot because, that was, that was before we had our encounter. So, yeah, it's strange.
It's a fascinating account, Scott, and I can't thank you enough for coming on. I can't thank you enough for sharing, and thanks for all the kind words about the show, and thanks for listening to the show too, by the way.
I will continue to listen. I like all those people out there that have had the opportunity to come on your show. I admire each one of them. Each one of them have shared some cool stories that are really fascinating.
Well, this one was good. This one was really good. I was just as enthralled listening to it the second time around as I was the first time. So thank you so much for coming on.
You bet. Thank you again.
All right, brother. You have a good night.
Okay, you too. Thanks again.
It's a pretty interesting story. I sent Mr. Black a message asking him if that was, the situation that he had told me about a while back. So it'll be interesting to find out if that's a corroboration or not.
I thought his story was absolutely, man, it was right up there with one. I know I say this on a lot of shows, say that was the best one I've ever heard, but that was the best one I've ever heard.
It was mesmerizing, wasn't it?
It was.
I mean, just sit with your mouth open and listen,
I did. When he was talking about the female and how the female had its mouth open, and I'm thinking to myself, well, yeah, she's got her mouth open. She's being chased. She's probably being shot at. There's weird noises. There's weird things flying in the air. And you know how animals get.
Exactly. I was just thinking that a lot of animals, when they get scared and excited and they've been running, that's exactly how they react.
They get freaked out, and I was right there with him, and he was talking about how the mouth is cocked off to the side. And it was fun. It was kind of funny because I'm sitting here, and I'm like, okay, my mouth is open, and now I'm cocking my mouth to the side, and I'm going through all these motions that I think that the female Sasquatch is in. Wow, and then when he was all done telling the story, it was like I almost I needed a minute to process it all. I was just like.
And did you notice when he talked about the posture of the creature, the way how it was bending when it looked up at the helicopter, the knees were slightly bent, and it bent the whole torso to be able to see, and that's exactly like what we see in the Patterson film, and many other people have said, about how they move. They can move their heads a little bit, but it's not like we have, with our long neck. They have a real limited range of motion with their head, so they have to turn their whole bodies.
Yeah, just everything he had to say about that,
it was right on the money.
It was. He was spot on with everything. I mean, and I'm constantly still learning. Just as far as I was concerned, he was spot on. And wow, what a story! What a story!
Yeah, it was a great one. And I agree with you. I think it was probably the best one we've heard.
I think it was. I think it's right up there. I mean, and all our people that we have on here, all our guests that come on, hey, we want to hear everybody's story. But I'm telling you, that was a good one. It
was a good one. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just wish I knew the answers to the rest of that story. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, where did the infant go? Where did the juvenile? Where did they take him? What was done?
She went on, had more children, and she lived a long life, Woody. I'm gonna tuck you in. I'm gonna tuck you in, give you a kiss on the head, and tell you good night.
You're all cocky because this is your second time listening to the stories, so now you're getting all cocky over there.
That's because Wes is already tucked in.
Yeah, he's already tucked in.
Wow,
you're a jerk. You're a jerk.
Trying to help you out with.
Oh man. Yeah. Now I really don't know what to say. Now I'm really stumped.
That's your show for tonight, everyone. We'll be back on Sunday to talk with the Brown family, who's had Sasquatch out on their property there in Washington State. Till Sunday, everyone. Have a great night. I think it's the American Primate. It's his organization. And all three of us were invited out. I know Will couldn't schedule it in, couldn't make it out there, but he'll definitely be missed. And what do you think, Woody? Should we take our podcast equipment? Should we go out there and interview people when we're...
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. I think we should take some stuff out there and we might get some of the best interviews out there. I mean, everybody's interested in the same topic. Let's record some stuff, man. Let's get some new stuff added to the show. I think it'd be a good idea.
Think people will be offended if I show up with some flute awards to hand out?
You got to do it.
I think they'd be offended if you don't, brother.
Probably.
We'll call up to the people. They won the annual Flute Player Award for the year from Sasquatch Chronicles.
A few notables who should have those awards that may be there.
Oh, they'll be all over it. They'll be playing their flutes. No pun intended.
We're going to be run out of town when we get to the beach. Get those guys, Sasquatch Chronicle guys, out of there.
Who invited these jokers?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a good plan, man. So anybody listening to the show, go ahead and you guys are going to that beach thing that we're going to have some stories ready. We'd like to interview and get some stories. We'll put it on the show.
Yeah. If you want to meet a couple schmucks, me and Woody will be there. Come on down. Tonight on the show we have the Brown family. I know we're going to bring Sarah and hopefully John on here shortly. And they've actually had a lot of stuff going on up at their property here in Washington for a long time. I know Sarah's been talking back and forth with myself. She's been talking back and forth with Will. I think Will said that for 2 years they've had stuff going on. Isn't that what she said, Will? She lost 2 years?
Yeah, for the past 2 years.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to talking with them. And I know we got some audio clips that we're going to play tonight, but I want to welcome Sarah to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good.
Well, you guys, I guess we should tell listeners that you, among Sasquatch encounters throughout the history of the subject, what you have going at your location is actually a rarity. Where it's been going on for at least 2 years, right?
Yes.
Okay. So those situations don't happen very often. So since it's been so long, what I'd like to do is kind of start out at the beginning before anything happened there, and sort of tell us a little bit about you and John, and then how things started, how you started noticing anything out of the ordinary, or when you first knew it might be a Sasquatch or more there.
John's dad grew up on this property. There were 11 kids in that family. And John's grandfather used to have a smokehouse where their house that John grew up in after moving from Nia Bay. He used to have a smokehouse that sat there, and his grandfather used to tell stories about how a Sasquatch would go into his smokehouse and steal his fish. And then the next day he would find raw fish outside of his smokehouse. There's always been a history on this property. There's always been a history with the family. When John and I started dating about 6 years ago, he had told me about his interest in Sasquatch, and I thought he was funny. He told me he wanted to go on a BFRO expedition or something. I actually told my mom, and she thought he was funny too for thinking that. As we got more and more serious, he was telling me stories, and I became more curious. Then we really started reading all the best books we could find, watching the good documentaries, and I realized that there was something major to it, all the evidence that you just don't hear about. John and his brother went to the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. Their first night there, they heard one. It was just a massive, massive roar. And John came home, told me about it, and we started researching areas, like well-known areas, and we found out Gray's Harbor is just a hot spot, They really like this area, and I think there's just so much forest here, so much land. We realized, man, there's probably more to your grandfather's stories than just stories, And so we started talking to a few neighbors that have been around for a long time. They shared their stories, their encounters. We just started researching out of our backyard and found that they were in our backyard. We started figuring more out, learning what not to do. Long story short, we had gotten audio set up at September 6th of last year. Now patterns are starting to form.
What were the first signs that tipped you off that Sasquatches were there in that area?
We had found some odd stick structures or stick art, whatever you want to call them, and that kind of struck interest in us, and they were really close to our house. And so John, Ben, and I, John's brother, went outside, and I recorded just this massive, massive roar, followed by another massive roar, and then it sounded like a Sasquatch just yelling at something. What it was saying, I don't know who it was yelling at. I recorded that from my cell phone, and so we realized that they were right there, and that was daylight too.
You've actually seen the creatures, is that right?
I've seen them 3 times.
Okay.
John has seen them 5 or 6, I believe. The first time either of us saw one was that same month. It was 2 weeks later, and him and I, we'd walk into the tree line and we would hang leftovers from a tree, thinking that they were taking them, but of course they weren't, But we didn't know at the time, and we would hang food from a tree. And a lot of times when we would walk in there, we were told it's good to always alert them. And so we would either click rocks or we'd whistle. And after a few times, it didn't take long. As soon as we walk in that tree line and we would either whistle or clack rocks together, we would hear a whistle. And then we would hear almost like a roll call around the woods. Like you hear a whistle and then crack and then a wood knock and then, another rock clack and a thump and just kind of like, hey, there's a person here. Got it.
Right.
And then, and then one time, broad daylight, we were walking in there. I was about 30 feet ahead of John with a food plate, and he stops and he goes, we need to turn around and go right now. And I turn and look at him. He's looking over his left shoulder, and I could tell what he was seeing. I knew by the look on his face. And he would glance for a couple seconds, and then look down at the ground, glance, look down. And he kept saying, we need to go. And so both of us are stressed out. I'm kind of pacing with this food plate. I didn't look over. Don't ask why. It's just one of those things that I didn't do. He eventually talks me out of exiting the woods and going back home. And that's when he saw a 9-foot one, just a massive one. For the longest time, he talked about how big its butt was, just this massive muscular butt. But that one was around 9 feet tall, 60 feet away.
When was the first time you saw one of them?
The first time I saw one was September 6th of last year. We had a thermal eye camera, you know, one of those old school ones. They don't record or anything. They're just for viewing purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And John and I were standing outside by where the audio tent is, and we hear knock, knock, knock really close to us, and it freaked us out. So we retreated to the porch, and then John walked around the corner with his flashlight, another stupid thing that we did at the time, and he shines it, and he runs around the corner back, and he said back to me, and he goes, "Eye shine." And so he just saw these bright white eyes with the reflection of his flashlight. So I walked around the corner with the thermal eye, and there it was, roughly, I think it was 120 feet away. I have the exact measurement. It was just past the barbed wire fence, and it was just slightly swaying back and forth while it was moving to the right. And it was behind really tall blackberry bush. I'll have to show you. I have a picture of it, actually. It was swaying and swaying, and then it stopped. And I just stared at it. I was completely in awe. I was more freaked out than I'd ever been. I could just feel my eyes were dilated, you know. But I stared at it for, it seemed like a half hour, but in reality it was probably 2 or 3 minutes. I remember Derek Randalls had said, "This is an old camera. If you guys ever see one, take a picture with your cell phone as a viewfinder." He was totally kidding. But after a while, you know, after calming down as much as you can when you're staring at a 7'6" Sasquatch or a 6'7" Sasquatch, John goes,
"That's kind of a tough situation."
"Oh yeah, it is." And John goes, "Take a picture with it. Take a picture with your cell phone." So I did. And David Ellis came over and we redid it. We found where it was standing. It was all compressed. We found a pot that we believe the creature was banging on. The whole thing is on audio too, which is always cool. You know, for the correlation, then you hear our ridiculous reactions and everything. So that was the first time.
Sarah, is that the famous thermal picture that you guys have?
No, that was from October 31st.
Oh, okay.
That was 2 months later. That was with the FLIR.
I gotcha.
The video.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Sorry, Will, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No problem. No problem. So what happened next after that situation?
After that, we were lent a FLIR BTS from Wally Hersom. Started using it, trying to figure it out, and those things are so hard to, not hard to work necessarily, but just to understand what you're looking at.
Sure.
You know, and especially when everything is about the same temperature. And so I started using it, and about a week later, I quickly showed my brother-in-law how to use it. I said, "Look, just real quick run through," because neither of us really like to be told what to do by me, if you know what I mean. That's how you guys are. And so I didn't even ask John. I thought, you know, he'll learn how to do it on his own. And I said, "Ben, just real quick, run through. This is how you record. This is how you change, you know, contrast, whatever." 2 nights later, they're sitting outside, and half of the cows had been taken earlier that day. And the remaining ones were so loud and obnoxious just all day. I didn't even turn on audio because all you could hear were cows. And the guys were about to come in, and they hear, again, tap, tap, tap on a tree. John picks up the FLIR and looks through it, and when he came inside, he said to me, he goes, "I think I just filmed a Bigfoot, but I'm not sure." And I go, "Well, what makes you say that?" And he goes, "Well, it just looks like a head to me. I didn't see ears. It just looked like a head, and it was standing completely still like a Sasquatch would." And he goes, but, you know, I was whistling at it and, you know, trying to get it to do something, and it didn't. It just stood there. And I go, well, was it a cow that was, like, laying down? And he goes, it didn't look like it, but I'm not sure. Well, John is so low-key that he didn't press for it anymore. A week later, I was like, hey, I'm going to check out what he filmed. Pop in that SD card. First thing I see is the still image that John had taken because he couldn't figure out how to push record. And I saw it, and I go, oh, my gosh, that's a Sasquatch standing there. I call Ben in the room, and I go, look at this. And he goes, oh, my goodness, it's John. And then we pulled the video, and I was just completely in awe. There's science behind that video. This one man wrote a couple months ago, and he said, you know, I spilled something on the screen of my phone, and I quickly went to clean it off. And when I pressed on the screen, it kind of distorted whatever it does, you know, with the screen. And he goes, I could see eye sockets, a collarbone, you know, the sagittal crest. I could see all of that. And he's like, this is amazing to me. And so then we had Phil Poling come out and do his breakdown. And he said, when he left, he goes, I think he saw a Sasquatch. And I go, I know that was a Sasquatch. And he, you know, kind of chuckled. He did such an awesome job on that. I don't know if you've seen that, but I
mean, I was shocked when I saw it. And I know Woody's seen it. I know Will's seen it. You know, I could tell it was out of focus, but that was no cow.
Oh, no, there's no way. You know what? I gotta lend some credit to the guys, too. I don't know if you know Kirk Brandenburg. He shot some New Mexico footage, and with an old school FLIR. He was on like a Finding Bigfoot episode or something, but he's a really close friend of ours. And he said to me, he said, you know what? I've used a FLIR BTS before, and this should not look like this. There shouldn't be that outer ring, and it shouldn't be this out of focus. So he called FLIR, and they said, no, it's out of warranty. And he said, well, hey, I know that Wally Hersom has been a loyal customer of yours for quite a while. This is his camera. And so they said, okay, we'll check it out. And they called us back and said, yeah, there is something wrong with whatever it was. And they sent us a letter and everything. And they said they fixed it, but it still wasn't up to par when we had gotten it back. So I think that if it wasn't defective, I think that it would have turned out a lot better than that. It wasn't solely due to the poor focus, you know.
Sure. After the footage was taken, what went on then?
Lots of audio. Tons and tons of audio. I would say that it's safe to say they are within close proximity. I know that, Will, you and I had talked about how they move around, you know, right. But still remain in their, you know, in their territory kind of thing. But I would say they remain within recording capabilities, maybe 85% of the time. We get a lot of daylight activity too, which I know is not common. I don't know why, but that clip that I sent you today where I'm so confused about that clip, and no one ever tells me of an animal. They're just like, I don't know what that is. It sounds like a toddler. We hear that one a lot during the day. A lot.
Hey, sir. I don't mean to interrupt, but it might help for some of the other listeners out there to kind of, and I know exactly where you're at. I worked out there for years, so I know just about where you live. But if you could kind of explain maybe the landscape of where you live, and that might help kind of explain maybe why you're getting some daytime activity.
Oh, okay. So the land is, our house sits within a fence that's about 2.5 acres. It's surrounded by a cow pasture that's leased out to a man about 6 months out of the year just for grazing. On the outer perimeter of the pasture, there's a creek, there's a river, there's not a huge wooded area. There's enough.
I do remember last time I was out there in your area, it seemed to be a lot of, and I don't know exactly where you live, but I know there's some government land with power line runs that run through there. I also know that Weyerhaeuser owns some property out in your close to your area. So there is heavily forested areas. There's water. There's a lot.
Oh, yeah, and there's the Olympic National Forest is right, close. But in our immediate yard, there's not. I should send you guys a Google map of it so you could get a better idea. Not to share anything, but, just for you to see. But it's, as some people would call, it's very squatchy. You guys all have to come out here, too.
Yeah, have us out.
Anytime you guys want to come out. Anytime you want to come out. You don't live far.
People from where Sarah's from, it's a very beautiful area. There is heavily forested areas. There's also clear-cut areas. Weyerhaeuser owns a bunch of the land. There's plenty of water. You're not too far from the Naso River. I'm not sure what the other
it's not heavily
water.
populated, that part of the state.
No, it is not, and it's gorgeous. So I just kind of wanted to kind of paint a picture for people out there that are listening, and I think that's important because it explains why you're getting more daytime activity than other areas. I don't know, might be a dumb idea, but I just kind of wanted to point that out.
No, I agree. Sometimes when you know everything about something, you forget,
right?
To explain the details.
That's kind of what I was thinking, there's, like I said, I worked out there for almost 4 years in that area, and it's a gorgeous area, so I understand why you're having daytime expo.
Yeah, it was interesting. You mentioned the eye shine. We were doing some research out south of Raymond one year. A friend's lab went crazy one night, and we saw the same thing. Not far from the camp, there was one right up near the camp watching us. But anyway, so
was it white? Were the eyes white?
Yeah, I've seen white and amber. It really depends on the type of light you shine at them.
Oh, really? Okay. Because I feel like a common one is red.
No, actually it's not that common. People think it is. And I talked with the old timers years ago. In fact, John Green told me one time we were discussing eye shine. And he says, it's a common misconception. He says, out of the thousands of reports I have in my files, out of all the people who reported eye shine, he says, I think I have 7 reports, and the rest are all amber or white. And different
That's interesting.
Have different colors. So with all this activity now, how long was it before you had your second sighting there?
It was 2.5 weeks. I went outside to turn on audio. It was just after dark. John and Ben were sitting in the gazebo like they do every single night. And I went outside and I could hear some sticks and stuff breaking about, I would say, 500 feet. Mm-hmm. There's 117 feet between where our property ends and then the ridge. And it's lightly wooded. And then there's this opening, this clear opening, and then there's the wooded area where we hear them a lot. I could hear it coming from that direction. So I looked through this is when we still have the thermal eye, not the FLIR yet, no recording capabilities. I looked through it and I could see one over there. And I say he because I don't think that we've ever seen a female. We've heard the female, but I don't think we've ever seen the female. No, we've never seen breasts or anything, But so I look over and I see him kind of walking. I could see it from the side view, see him kind of walking towards the ridge. And me, totally foolish, I yell out, I go, you guys, there's one right there. And so they get up and walk over, and Ben grabs the thermal eye, and he goes, oh, I see something white walking over there. And by then I think that was the creature's head going down. I'm sure that they were very well aware that the guys were sitting there, but it didn't seem like it was observing them or even really cared, if that makes sense. Sometimes we'll hear them and they're really, really close. It's just kind of like they're doing their own thing.
Right.
Did I send you that clip of, I think it was titled, Big Branch Break at John and Ben? John and Ben are in the gazebo, and it's like a 2-minute clip, and you can just hear all these huge branches breaking. And I asked John, I go, did you feel sweat? And he goes, Well, no, because where we had found all these sticks that were broken, there wasn't even a view of the guys. I don't know. I think that a lot of people always say, well, they were doing this to intimidate you. They were trying to show dominance and stuff, but I bet a lot of it's just out of boredom.
Yeah, that does happen occasionally, especially in the more long-term situations like yours. If it's more of a chance encounter, then it's a display of some kind. But, back in 89, 90, I mentioned this on the show before, when we were investigating the Yakult incidents, that was a 9-month situation very similar to what you have there. And oftentimes, they would come in and check out the farm. And a lot of times I think they were just bored. Everybody that saw one, in fact, 2 young girls, teenagers, were chased by one up to the house one evening. And they said, they were banging pots and pans trying to scare it away. And finally they said just kind of looked bored and just walked off.
Wow. I would be terrified if I was chased by one.
Those were common events at that time. Yeah, they were terrified.
Wow. Yeah, when we first started all this and we were doing all the stupid stuff like shining flashlights in their faces and stuff, John and Ben had gone to another area close to our house where we hear them a lot. And it was during the day, and John came home and said, he goes, I feel really uncomfortable with what we just did. And I go, well, what'd you do? And he goes, I just felt like we were getting too close to stick structures, and I just felt like we were being watched and everything. Well, that night he goes outside, and whack, just from different directions of the yard, just beating on the trees. And he peeks his head in the door, and he goes, you've got to come out here. This is nuts. And they were just beating the heck out of those trees, telling him, hey, back off. We don't come that close to your stuff. We don't get up in your stuff. So he felt very threatened then, so I know that there are some times where that is the case.
That was a question I was going to ask you. Have they approached the house yet?
I don't know if they ever crossed that fence. I'm not sure. I can't say. I think their favorite part is that ridge where the thermal one was filmed.
It almost sounds like they're kind of getting comfortable with you at this point, in a certain sense.
It's what it sounds like.
Right? I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting out of it. It's like, I almost wonder if they actually know that you're watching and they really don't care kind of at this point. I mean, it's starting to get more comfortable throughout time, is kind of what I'm saying.
I agree. I feel like I know absolutely nothing about them still, but I do think that there is that smidge of change. I think that they're very aware. We're aware of them. They don't. And even though they don't come walking out during the day, I know that they know that we're there. When we brought home Sydney, our 6-month-old, from the hospital, she was a couple weeks old, and we went into the tree line because we just hadn't gone in there forever. I had her in a Moby wrap in the front of me, which is kind of like a baby backpack. And we just went into the very front of the tree line, broad daylight, and we were in there for about 10 minutes. We found some footprints. I think you were invited over, Wes, to cast some of those. But as soon as we exited the tree line...
I wasn't invited anywhere.
Oh, you weren't?
No.
That's Woody talking. He never gets invited.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was not invited. Anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But as soon as we exited the tree line...
That's usually why he interrupts everyone.
He gets all the attention. Yeah, whatever.
He gets all the what?
Anyways, he gets all the attention.
Well, Woody, you should come over later.
Yeah, see, there we go. Now we're talking.
Yeah. But as soon as we exited the tree line, we hear this whoop, like just this gentle whoop. It was so funny, and I turned around and smiled. We were just like, what? It was cool. So, it's those little things like that every once in a while where it's just like, man, we could pretty much start calling each other by first names now, you know, and then the next day they do something and I'm just like, okay, I don't know anything about you guys, you know?
Oh, and you know what, that's important, Sarah, that you say that, because, and it's funny that you said that, because I was just kind of thinking the same thing. You know, we've had several people on the show. They've talked about, we've heard several encounters. I've had my own personal encounter. Will has, Wes has as well, and as you. And it's funny how we talk to so many different people and we get so many different stories, and that tells me that a lot of these things have several different personalities along with kind of like ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I talk to people that, oh, God, they want to kill us. And then I talk to other people, and then it's like, we want to sit down and have dinner together. And then, you know, I talk to other people, and they're kind of like, well, I don't really know where we kind of stand with them. And it's funny because, you know, talking with you, it's kind of like, you know, you kind of tell your own different personality about how you feel, how these creatures react, you know. So that's kind of cool. Anyway.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, you know, I don't think anyone can really say what, oh, they don't do that, or they do that. Because I'll hear some people say, well, I've heard that they like this or that they do this. And the ones here don't. They will not take my food. And a lot of people say, oh, just keep doing it, be persistent. And it's to the point now where it pisses me off, you know. And I was left a decapitated coyote pelt that its tail was wrapped around a tree hanging there because we were having problems with them coming into the yard. And so completely gross, and it grossed me out. But I was just like, okay, I guess I'll say thank you for this weird gift. And I put some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in a Ziploc bag, and I hung them on the barbed wire fence that the coyote pelt was by. And that they sat there, and it sat there, and they were leaving little things by the bag of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to let me know that they were seeing them, but they weren't taking them. And I was just like, you guys are ridiculous. Like, they even hung ivy 10 feet up, and it went all the way down to the ground. And I was just like, they have to have a good sense of humor.
I can give you an example of that, you know, kind of messing with what they do. Again, the alcohol thing, there were so many things that happened during that 9 months. What was happening there was the family was new to farming, and they were from Wisconsin. They really didn't know much about farming in Washington, so they had a horse and I think about 10 or 12 acres, and they raised a garden and didn't really know, you know, they were just trying out lots of new things to them. And they had a lot of radishes, and they didn't like the radishes. So they would pull, you know, a big handful of radishes and put them out for the horse. Well, the horse wouldn't eat them. The radishes would come up missing every morning. And it was right where the first sighting was, you know, by the family, was where the radishes, in that general area. So we knew they were taking the radishes. And I talked to a guy at the time who was the head of the Oregon Regional Primate Center, Henner Fahrenbach, who was kind of worthless when it comes to anything with Sasquatch. So we talked on the phone, and I said, well, this is what's going on in my anthropology training. They said, if you want to observe or learn anything about primates, you have to observe them without interfering in what they're doing. Otherwise, it alters what they do if you have
100%.
So we discussed this, and he says, well, I think we should I can bring out this and that. And I said, well, you know, my training was, you don't interfere. And he says, well, you know, I'm a PhD, I know more than you, blah, blah, blah. So we kind of argued, and as it came out, he says, well, look, okay, you know, we can talk about it when I come out. So the guy violated our agreement when he was coming out, and he brought all this junk. He had a little hibachi, he was cooking meat, he put turnips out there, a box of donuts, all this stuff. And what had happened was it pissed the group of Sasquatches off. They took the box of donuts, they took a big bite out of one of the turnips, threw it down, and they went to the neighboring farm and completely tore their garden up. And it scared the people so bad, they abandoned their property.
Oh, my goodness.
So, you know, there's some lessons learned about primates and what to do and what not to do. And you made a good point about the different personalities. something I've learned over the years with all the different, probably thousands of stories, I've heard people tell me, like with people. Now, it's not just the different personalities, different psychologies, even right down to how well the creature's eaten that day, how its behavior might be, moods and things like that. So you're going to get the whole range, just like with people, and other primates do the same things. There's, everyone has a different personality and things they do and behaviors.
That is the one thing that I've gone through everything with what I think they are. And what someone wants to think they are, that's fine. Let them have their own thought. I don't like it when people pick on, all these people for what they believe, because no one really knows what they are. But personally, I've gone through all these different thoughts, and they'll do something, and I'm like, okay, they're just ape. Oh, okay, they're this, they're that, And finally, about a month ago, I was just like, you know what? I think that we as people tend to overcomplicate things
absolutely.
that are unknown. And, like a lot of people that just see one take off and run so fast, they're like, it just cloaked. When in reality, it's just like, no, you just don't realize how fast that thing took off.
Right. And people put, there's a term called anthropomorphism, and that's when people apply human traits and characteristics on non-human species.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to explain.
Exactly.
That big word you just said. Yep.
Right.
I agree. And I think when you start thinking the right way, like just a simple way, it kind of starts to make sense. And about maybe a month or two ago, I was like, you know what? I think that they are, I don't think that they're a type of person necessarily, maybe more intelligent than an ape. I don't know. And this is just my thought. But the one thing that makes me go, man, I don't think that they could just be a great ape is for that reason, for their personalities and things like that. Because you can look at a dog. Yeah, you can look at a dog and you can go, okay, even though pit bulls, a lot of them, are aggressive. There's a few that are nice. You still know what a pit bull's going to do. You still know what a cat's going to do. You know what it's going to, that it's going to go sit on the couch all day when you're gone. You know that it's going to go poop in the litter box, and you know what animals are going to do. I cannot predict these things for the life of me.
There's a lot of gaps in the hominid fossil record, and some really big gaps, because a lot of areas like in forests and jungles, fossilization doesn't take place in those kinds of areas. For instance, if chimps would have died out 500 years ago, we'd have stories like the Sasquatch, these big hairy creatures that were man-like existed, and people would say, oh, that's all myth. Well, we don't know all the things that did exist and still exist. And what these are, they're probably kind of a leftover.
You think so?
I think so. I think they're a continuation of something that we just don't know about yet.
Yeah.
Actually, that's right.
I know so many people make it really complicated, and one day my mom, who's just absolutely amazing, and she's kind of living vicariously through our stories right now because she's just completely fascinated. And I was trying to tell her, Mom, I think that Sasquatch is this because it does this or does this. And she goes, well, what's to stop God from just making a Bigfoot? And I was like, yeah, you're right. Why do I have to put all of these
That's right.
things on it, So.
Yeah, people do things instead of just making observations. And, you can do comparative things to other primate species. And there's some things you can pick that are similar from lots of different primate species that these guys do. So, but they're their own creatures, so they're going to be unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
one more thing I want to touch on is when you said a couple minutes ago, you said how when that the guy came out and he completely interfered, and you had said, these creatures, you cannot interfere with them, or they do things like tear up farms. We have learned that so much in the past couple months. First, Stacy Brown came out, and we were out there every night Sasquatching and we could hear them, and it just could not get thermal, get them in view of thermal, nothing. And the last night Stacy was here, we were just all exhausted sitting in the gazebo. I had gone into the house, and right from the ridge, clack, clack, clack. And the next day I was like, they want to come to us. We don't need to go out there. It just makes them mad. It makes them go away for a while. And then, this past month we've been so beyond busy with fireworks and everything that it has been crazy. And last June and July were the quietest months of the year. This July has been absolutely nuts because we have not gone into that tree line one time. And
things I learned a long time ago is one thing is you don't really want to go out in their area at night because usually
we try not to.
Socializing and doing what they're doing. It's usually okay during the day because they're up in their sleeping areas. But again, back to the aqua thing, we had a guy. This guy claimed he was well, let me back up a little bit. It's kind of a funny short story, but some of my friends we'd go up there just about every night, and we would stay in the family's yard because usually they'd come up to the fence line and they wouldn't go in the yard unless nobody was there, and sometimes, then they'd come in the yard. But I saw the car headlights coming from north of us from the town, and I thought it was one of our other friends coming, and it wasn't. The little blue Porsche pulls up, and a man and a woman get out, and this is right at dusk. And the guy, he starts to head to the tree line across this barbed wire fence. And I said, I wouldn't go up there if I were you. And he says, well, I'm a biologist from Seattle. I know what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. So they threw their backpacks over the fence and climbed over, and up the hill they went. I looked at my friends, and I said, they'll be back. About 20 minutes later, it was pretty dark, and I see these flashlights just bobbing furiously coming down through the timber, and they throw their packs over the fence and just about kill themselves trying to climb over this barbed wire fence. And the guy hops in the car and fires it up, and the woman's halfway hanging out as he's tearing out of the side of the road, getting out of there. And
my goodness.
The Sasquatches were coming down off the top of the hill the same direction every night. We hear them scream up there, and then that would usually signal them coming down into the valley. And they happened to encounter them as they were coming down, and it wasn't a pleasant encounter. But
oh, wow.
My friend started laughing. He says, you called that one right on the money. I said, I can watch what they're doing, and know when to stay out of the way.
You have two groups on the property, correct? Or around the property?
Well, we have one group that lives on the land, but we know of another group that lives fairly close, but we get a group of I think that they're juvenile males, looking for their own territory. They come through every once in a while, and they don't go behind our house where this group lives, but they go to the perimeter, and they're scary. I wouldn't want to encounter them.
They're probably looking for females.
The juvenile group that is around the property that never actually crosses over the boundary of where the group that you're familiar with, the juvenile group that is around the property, when you say they're kind of scary, what do you mean by that? I mean, can you kind of go into...
I shouldn't say that because I don't want people to think that they're monsters, but they're just kind of cocky. I always say that they're hood, but we'll hear them during the day, and it's every couple months. I don't know how often they're around or how close they wander regularly, but we'll hear them during the day, and I'm just like, man, there's people that can hear you right now, and they'll just be hooting and hollering across the street. I have one audio clip of where I was in the front, and I was whistling across the street because we hear them over there a lot. I was getting whistled back, and the whistle was getting closer. And this was after dark, closer and closer. And then I whistle, and directly across the street, it couldn't have been 2 feet past that tree line, I got the most crazy vocal. And I thought the Sasquatch was going to step right out. It was just right there. But I believe that was one of them. I should send you guys that audio clip. It kind of sounded like a weird elephant type. Oh, man, it's a really odd sound. But
interesting to hear that.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'll send it to you as soon as we get off the phone. But also that turf wars clip that I sent you, which is one of my favorites, is that group. The ones that are banging on the trees and going, oh, and that's that group right on the perimeter of the property.
It's a good time to play that one, Wes. Did you want to let the listeners hear that one?
Sarah, I want to get through some of your audio clips, but can you kind of tell us what was going on there?
Oh, man, you tell me. They, the 2 weeks before that clip, John and I were like, okay, because we kind of base what they possibly eat on a bear. And that time of year, there's no berries. Salmon's not, in the river yet. And, there doesn't seem to be as much deer, elk, whatever. I'm so not an outdoorsy person, so bear with me. But it doesn't seem like there's, much food around at that time. And we were like, man, they're just like the craziest behavior. And during the day, like just almost like they were eating mushrooms or something, or, getting into someone's beer or something. I don't know. And then
so you're saying Sasquatch is tripping at this point, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Totally, that's what I'm saying. I have no clue. And that's why I said, do you think they have a mating season? Because they were acting so weird and loud, and we didn't hear a peep from the female. Not even on audio, not a peep. Nothing. Then when I heard that clip, I was just like, man, do they have a mating season and they were coming to seek out that female? What's going on here,
I know we're running short on time, but I wanted to play a couple more of your sounds. This one's called the Big Guy Gibberish and Female Response, and it looks like it's a 5X.
That is, we call him Big Guy because of his voice. I think that's the alpha male. And we have him talking to the female on many occasions. And I love that clip because all she does is goes, mm-hmm. And then we have other clips of her doing the same thing with the one that we call the yip yeller. He always yells yip at us. But she's either going, mm-hmm, or she sounds like she's nagging. I don't know. We don't hear much from her, you know? But when we do, she's just either agreeing or nagging. Could you hear her at the end?
I mean, it didn't sound like a known animal, but it's kind of hard to pick up. How far away do you think they were at the time when they were doing that?
I think that they were either, do you hear that?
Yeah, I heard that one too. Yeah.
Oh. They do really bad impressions of the cows. Like, the cows are down there. I don't know if you can hear the cows because it's kind of far away, but the cows are mooing, and then you get that, and it's just, cows don't have lungs like that. They're really bad at some impressions, but they're geniuses with others.
Yeah, they are imitators, definitely.
Oh, for sure. And one time David Ellis and I heard we heard a crow, and then a couple minutes later we heard caw, caw, and we were like, caw? That's all you've got? Like, it was just such an awful impersonation. But
I got the yip yeller vocals loaded up.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and play that one real quick. Wow, that's creepy.
Yeah, he's the vocal one for sure. We have a clip that's like 7 minutes, and we're all talking, and from really far away you can hear yip, yip, and it just gets closer and closer, and we're completely oblivious to it the entire time. And it's to the point where he's louder than us.
That last clip that you played, didn't that sound like similar to the samurai chatter type thing?
That's what I was thinking too.
It actually reminded me of one of those sounds going on in the Blue Mountains, and the guy goes out and he fires off a couple shots, and after the third shot, you hear this, you hear him like scream something, and you can't quite make out what he's screaming.
Well, you know what I was just thinking is how many people have we heard say that it sounds like someone's having a conversation, but you can't make out the words?
Right.
That's kind of what it made me think of.
To us, it sounds like deaf Indians.
Yeah, and a lot of people have said that. I've heard a lot of people say that. Like a deaf person or deaf Indians or... Right.
Yeah.
You know what I think we should do? I think we should take that noise and play it backwards and see what it says.
This isn't a Led Zeppelin.
Oh, Woody, such a submissive thing to say.
Oh, we're going...
I'm kidding.
Sir?
I'm kidding.
Sir, do you see why he never gets invited anywhere? Do you see why no one wants him around?
Woody has the guest beating him up now.
Play it backwards.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to sit here and look pretty the rest of the show. Okay, guys? And gals.
Yeah, that guy's our most vocal. And I think that he reminds me of like a 20-something that has a crush on his high school teacher.
Now I got two last clips to play. I got the female, and I got the big guy gibberish. Should I play the big guy gibberish first, do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, it's that same growly voice.
Okay, I'll play that real quick. And I'm curious, sir, before I play the brown female one, on the what you guys call the big guy, have you heard, the best way to describe it is like a lion's roar. Have you heard him do that?
Oh, yeah. That was the first recording I got. Yes. Massive,
so
massive lungs. Because when he yells, it's that loud. But you know what's funny? Is I think that if you guys listen to that War Cries one that I sent, his howl, which we catch on audio all the time, I probably have 30 clips of it, is his howl is very high. When Phil Poling was here, he's like, is that a female howling? But I think that it's alpha male. Yeah, that voice is nuts, huh?
Yeah, it is. It is. I was curious about the lion's roar. If you've, because recordings never really do justice when you're right there in the moment hearing it. I'm sure, because Woody and I have heard the lion's roar. I know Will's heard different vocals, and when you hear it, you're sitting there listening to it. You're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm sure if we would have caught it on recording, you probably couldn't have heard anything, but except for us squealing like little girls after we heard it.
Yeah.
But when you hear it, you're just like, oh my God, I can't, like, what in the world is that? It sounds like a lion up there just going off.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just kind of curious if you've heard that before or not. So I'm glad that you have. A lot of people report that.
Yeah, the very first recording we got was that. The very last part of that, it sounds like he's singing. You'll have to listen to it again. It's pretty funny.
Strange. Yeah, I'll have to go back and listen to that. I know we're running short on time. The last one I'll play is the brown female.
Yeah, those ones creep me out. John actually heard that. And he came inside and he goes, it sounds like there's kids singing or something in the tree line. It's creeping me out. Sounds like there's kids down there. And it was pretty late. I had posted that and sent it to a few people saying, have you guys ever heard this, Because it was a very high activity time, very high activity. And it was a time where we were picking her up, a lot more than usual as well. And someone wrote me back and said that their girlfriend saw a female Sasquatch down in a canyon, and she was walking along the, kind of like a ridge type thing in a canyon, and it looked like she was singing, and she sounded just like that. So, I don't know. It's creepy. And I think that the reason it's more creepy sounding is that the echo, because she was down in the valley.
Yeah, that is strange.
I don't know.
That's very
Those
strange.
Ones weird me out.
Have you heard them mimic you or John yet?
I don't know. Man. There's some times where I feel like I'll hear, because I come out here a lot by myself on the ridge, and I feel like I'll hear someone back at the house call my name, and I'll go back, I'll go towards the house, and I'll go, did you say something? And no one did.
Yeah.
So I have to say no because I can't be definitive about anything. But we have a couple audio clips of them saying what sounds like Sarah, which weirds me out.
Yeah. You know how many times I've heard that?
Out.
I've heard that
really?
so many times. Oh, yeah.
Are you serious? I never hear people say that, so I don't share that very often because that's one of those things, and I'm just like, this is kind of, and I know a lot of those audio clips are weird anyways, but that's one of those things that I'm like, saying my name, you're kind of crossing the line there,
Yeah. Mike from Siege of Hanabi would go out and call his dogs at night, and I've actually heard Kumbo and Bear. I don't know if you've heard them on the show. They talked a lot about this too, but Mike from Siege of Hanabi would go out and he'd call for his dogs every night. And one day he was gone, and his brother and his dad were sitting out in the front yard, and they heard Mike calling for his dogs. Mike was at work. Mike wasn't even at home. And they heard him from the forest calling for his dogs. I've heard Ron Moorhead say that.
Oh, my goodness.
I've heard...
Did it sound like him?
he said it kind of sounded like him. They were thrown off at first because they thought it was him out in the woods. They're like, what in the world?
Imitation.
Yeah, they were like, what in the world is he doing out in the woods calling for the dogs? And Kumbo's talked about that a lot too. He said they would mimic him calling for his dogs. It sounded like a deaf person mimicking him, but he said they would mimic him calling for his dogs. So I was just curious if you had heard that. It's not crazy, to be honest with you. I've heard it more times. Not just me. We've heard it more times than I care to.
And I should send you this clip now that we're talking about the creepy stuff. But one time I was left flowers on the stump. I had painted some sticks that I found one time that I thought looked like a juvenile had played with them. We found it by a print. And I painted some sticks and left them. And there were some flowers. They're actually weeds that were left in the middle of this stump. And a couple nights later, we hear one go, flowers, on audio. Wow. And it creeped me out. It could just be one of those, because the S kind of has like this, kind of like a whistle. You know when someone has like the missing bottom teeth and their S's kind of go, that's what the S does. So it could just be one of those coincidence sounds that, but it sure sounds like flowers. It kind of weirds me out. And the Sasquatch is right by the audio recorder when he does it.
Jesus. Poor John.
Yeah.
You imagine a Sasquatch bringing your wife flowers, and then you got to hear about how Sasquatch brings her flowers, and you never bring her flowers.
That's competition you don't want.
Yeah. The next day he goes and buys a huge lifted truck.
I'd love to do a show from there, just on site with you guys. And even if nothing happens,
that'd be awesome.
It'd be cool to be on site. Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime you guys want to come out there. Just try to pick a day that's not too windy.
I'd love to come out and pick your brain. I think you know more about these creatures than you realize, Sarah. I know you pass it off like.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I think you probably know more than you realize on.
Yeah.
I'd love to pick your brain on a lot of things, but I don't think you give yourself enough credit. I think you know a lot more than you realize.
I'd like to think I do. I'm such a huge animal lover. Like such a huge animal lover that I think that I can tend to be more empathetic maybe towards them than a lot of people are, if that makes any sense. So maybe when it comes to their behavior, maybe I know a little tiny bit more than I give myself credit for. But I just said the other day to John, I said, there's two things I know for sure about Sasquatch. One, they exist. Two, you can't predict anything about them.
Before we let you go, and I hate to do this to you, but I hate to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it. It's a total generic question. But, sir, what is your thoughts as far as what do you think Bigfoot really is? I mean, or Bigfoot or Sasquatch? Because, I mean, you've had so many, it sounds like you've had several different encounters. You've heard audio sound. It mimics you and your family. And it sounds like you're out in your backyard, and you've experienced the different personalities from talking to you, that the different personalities that Sasquatch has. Where do you stand? What do you think?
First, I don't think that's generic at all. That's like one of my favorite questions to ask people, because people have such different perceptions of what they do, But anyways, I have not a clue. My views have changed so much on them. Man, the one thing that makes me go, maybe they're not just a great ape, is the personality thing. They're too diverse. They're just funny. Like, I feel like the Yip Yeller one, I think that he has a crush on me, and that sounds completely nuts.
It actually doesn't sound crazy at all. I've heard that a lot too, believe it or not.
I think it's hilarious, but I dogs aren't like that. And it's things like that I'm just like, man, you're just a little bit too intelligent to just be this gray 8. So I have not a clue. I kind of stopped trying to figure it out because I know that I'll never get anywhere. I'll just get frustrated with it. I like to hear other people's views on it. Do I think that they go in and out of dimensions? No, not a chance. The ones that we have here are living, they're breathing creatures. Whether they're a type of human or ape, I don't know. But do they cloak? No. They walk around, they beat on trees, they yell at us, throw rocks into creeks. They don't do anything that's spiritual. So that I completely rule out, at least for the ones here. I don't know what other people are, seeing or whatever.
I think that was well said.
Yeah, I don't like to make fun of anyone. And, I do believe in a spiritual world. I know that stuff exists, so I don't know if there's different things that people are seeing. I don't know. But as for this situation, they're a living, breathing creature. I mean, you look at that thermal footage, and he's staring at cows, and it's picking up his body heat. If anyone can answer that question, I'll be the first to listen if they can say, what they are for sure.
You made the comment to where you think maybe one of them had a crush on you, and you thought it was kind of funny. You might want to be a little more serious about that, just because from everybody that we've talked to, especially the male ones, they like women, and people tend to disappear. So,
good point.
Just be careful. Just be careful. That's all I'm saying. If you go out there, don't take it. And I'm not telling you what to do or any of that, any of your business or any of that. But just be careful.
No, I agree. And I think that people are wrong when they say, oh, they're all sweet and they're our friends. They would never harm anyone. No, that's not true. I do think that the family that lives here, I think that they're very sweet and very peaceful. And I think that they have, I've got a few stories that kind of keep to myself, that there's been a few times, like the cougar story, where I feel like they were, watching out for us, or the decapitated coyote. But it's still a wild animal. I'll never get to hug it. I'll never get to pet it or anything. It's still a wild animal with wild tendencies. So I agree with you. And I think people need to be a little bit careful when they say that they're all friendly, because they're not.
Yeah, that's the thing I always caution people on. Exactly what you said. They're wild creatures is the bottom line, and have to be treated as such.
I know we're out of time, and I wanted to thank you for coming on the show, and I wanted to thank you for sharing everything you have going on there, and thank you for inviting us up. We're definitely going to take you up on the offer, but I just wanted to take a second to thank you for coming on and sharing all your audio with us and sharing all your stories with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Much.
I love your show.
I appreciate that. We appreciate that.
I'm totally honored to be on. And if you guys come out here, we'll do another live one. Hopefully get some good live audio, too.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, do it anytime. And activity is awesome right now. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to it, too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
Definitely be in touch with you, sir.
Okay, and I'll send you some of those audio clips that I was talking about tonight. I'll send some of those to you guys tomorrow.
Sounds good. And even if maybe me and Woody can make arrangements to come up, and then in September I'd like to get Will up there too.
Oh, perfect. You guys should come up before then, though.
Yeah, me and Woody will probably swing up that way.
Okay. Cool. Well, thanks again, guys.
Oh, thank you.
Sarah.
All right, have a good one.
You too.
From everybody here at Sasquatch Chronicles, thank you for joining the show tonight. We'll see you again next week.